Of all the final showdowns put to film, few are as iconic as this one. Dubbed the Trio, this climactic scene from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is the quintessential Mexican standoff. And while the trope itself is now largely considered a cliché, a lot of the cinematic language used in westerns influenced decades of action films. But what truly sets this scene apart is its complete absence of dialogue. All the scene's suspense and story is entirely captured through physical performance, composition, music, and of course, the edit. With the shot selection laid out like this, it's striking how clear the structure and rising tension of the scene is displayed in just the first frame of every shot. The overall trend of the scene's shot composition is framed closer and closer, and while this kind of stylistic choice wasn't uncommon in this era of filmmaking, here it's also being used for the specific purpose of establishing compositional patterns as a way to create visual rhythm. As for the context of our scene, we also see that one of our characters, Angel Eyes, aka the Bad, gets a few more shots than the others. And from our timeline, we could see that he does indeed get most of the screen time. It's actually not uncommon for antagonists to get more screen time during the film's climax, because we typically don't see them during the rest of the movie. And in this case, Angel Eyes also has a particular dilemma, which we'll see when we watch a bit of the scene. But changing our lens back to examine the scene's structure, we see that it's not just the pace of the shot-to-shot editing that generally increases, but the overall pace of the structure has an arc as well, matching the pace of the scene's narrative with the momentary editing. So each segment should feel like it has appropriate energy and timing. If you've ever watched a scene where the shot-to-shot pace and the scene's narrative pace are misaligned, you'll know that it can be incredibly jarring. But of course, we can't know that for sure until we experience it. So let's watch some of the scene. Specifically, I want to go back to those compositional patterns. This pattern is incredibly precise. Every shot is of near exact length. Every edit follows an eyeline. Every triplet of frame compositions is closer than the previous. Watching this scene, you can practically predict each cut. And that isn't a bad thing. Not only does it make the edit feel natural, but this structure is what creates anticipation. You can't anticipate random events, so establishing this pattern creates an expectation in the viewer's mind. And it's that expectation on which tension can build. What's truly masterful about it, though, is its use of rhythmic editing without being boring. The editors aren't using the same shot order over and over again. There's a flow to this edit that makes each triplet feel coherent and fresh. Every cut to and from an insert matches its owner, keeping the pattern intact and interesting without losing track of who we're looking at. And all of this is foundational to the rest of the scene, when we're going to be cutting between different characters and inserts. Establishing the eyelines and inserts here is critical to understanding the rest of the story in these next segments. Take this part, the turning point of the scene. We clearly see the thought process of Angel Eyes. He's trying to gain an edge as he inches his way towards his gun, when Blondie, aka the Good, looks over at him, and he backs off. Meanwhile, Tuco, aka the Ugly, is staring intently at Blondie, desperately trying to interpret his intentions. He doesn't know that Blondie isn't going to shoot him in this scene, so Blondie's cool, unbroken gaze leaves Tuco bewildered and unsure. As Blondie looks over at Tuco, he gives him just the slightest nod. This movement might look insignificant to you watching on your computer or your phone, but when projected on a big screen, this likely would have been unmissable. Then we cut back to Angel Eyes to see him pick up on the nod, and in that moment, realization dawns on him that Blondie and Tuco are allied against him. This is why he has the most screen time in this scene. We have to see him assess and evaluate the situation between Blondie and Tuco, and then steel his will to make a decision. And with Blondie looking away, he once again reaches out for his gun. As we cut in closer, the music and pacing start to crescendo. The anticipation and momentum of the scene reach a fever pitch, rapidly approaching a moment when inaction is no longer an option. Someone must shoot. In a resounding sequence, we go from an extreme close-up to a close-up to a medium to an extreme wide. And in the span of 6 shots, all that tension is released. What strikes me most about this scene is its commitment to clarity. There aren't any obfuscations or misdirects. All the information is presented up front, and we're given time to take in every detail and micro expression. This lets the edit establish not just a continuity of action, but a continuity of the character's thoughts and emotions, with nothing but inserts and eyelines. Together with the music, this creates a kind of hyper-awareness, the same kind of time-warping experience that occurs in high adrenaline moments. The characters are transfixed by shifting eyes, twitching fingers, and subtle nods, even though they're dozens of feet apart. And when they do draw their 6-shooters, we see and feel every beat. So it doesn't feel like a fake out when Blondie shoots first, even though it comes 4 cuts after Angel Eyes goes to pull his gun. It just feels like Blondie is that fast on the draw. The result is a scene that still feels grounded despite its heightened editing, which lets anticipation escalate for a long time. Watching this scene in full, it is palpably tense for the entire 3 minutes and 34 seconds, despite very little physical action. It demonstrates that great editing can be achieved with just a mastery of the basics. And if you can create such intense suspense with simple cuts, I'd say it makes it a pretty iconic showdown.